Welcome back to the Every Single Detail series. Today, we are going to be talking about the transform tools, which is extremely important when building or making games in Roblox Studio. First things first, by now you should be pretty familiar with how to move around in Roblox Studio. I have a video out if you really want to know all the tiny little details about camera movement / the viewport. The first tool that I have here is the select tool. This is probably the most important tool out of all of them because you can't really do any of the other tools without selecting a part. And that's what the select tool is practically for. And how you do that is pretty simple. All you have to do is a simple left click on a part that you choose. Now, if you want to select multiple parts, you can hold down Shift, Control on Windows, or Command on Mac. You can also select parts behind other parts by clicking on a part while holding down Alt or Option. I can't seem to get it to work on Mac though. I don't know if the Option button just doesn't work on my computer, but it is not working for me right now. There are also different ways you can see the boundaries of a part, and we can change that in the Selection Style setting under the View tab. Changing these will result in a different boundary around the part. This feature is most noticeable when you are editing meshes or any parts that have like a lot of curves and stuff like that. You won't necessarily see it with a boxy part, but typically I just keep it at both. That's about everything about the select part. Now we are going to move on to the move tool. The move tool does exactly what you think it would do. It moves parts. You get 3 different axes you can move a part on: X, Y, and Z or Z. I usually get mixed between X and Z or Z. Just remember, X is red, Y is usually pointing up, so that's got to be green. So blue must be Z or Z. So whenever you move your part, it will move a certain amount of a stud. That's literally the best way I could say it, I guess. But you can change the amount that the part moves by under the model page, which I recommend being at the model page whenever you use these tools. And under the snapping section, you'll get the move snapping setting and the rotate snapping setting. Changing the move setting to, for example, 4 studs will move the part on each axis 4 studs. The rotate setting will of course change how much a part rotates, but I will get into that later. If you like, you can also freely move a part by just holding down left click on the center of the part. The only caveat to that is that it will still collide with parts even if collisions are not enabled. If you want to change collisions, all you have to do is just check mark or uncheck mark this box. Having collisions on will have parts not intersect with each other whenever using the move tools or any of the tools in general. Having it off will allow them to intersect and move cleanly through them and allow them to be completely combined into kind of one shape, I guess. Join surfaces is a setting which will make any parts touching which also have this white outline weld together. Now what I mean by weld together, well, a weld is a type of constraint. I will have a whole video about collisions coming soon, going through each of them. Now the only problem with join surfaces is that this is really where the selection style kind of is important, because if you have the outline style selected, join surfaces will not actually like join on those surfaces. So if you had like a spear and try to connect it to a part and weld it via that, it's going to take the boundary box and join that surface to the part rather than the outline. I don't really know how to explain it in words. You're obviously going to see it on the screen, and it's probably going to be a bit more easier to understand. But that's basically what joint surfaces do. It's like gluing parts together, I guess, or welding parts together. I don't know. It's not really a better description of it. But that basically covers the move tool and the snapping section, or whatever you call it. The scale tool is just like the move tool, where it has 3 axes, but the scale tool will actually make things scale up in size. Wow, that's crazy. But that's what gives it the name. You can scale a individual side or scale the whole thing if you really like by selecting one of the points and pressing Shift. The scale tool is pretty self-explanatory and simple. One last thing, the scale tool will also increase in size based on the snapping move stud amount you choose. But that's not the last thing. Whenever you shift and select a point, remember that it's not going to scale from the center. It's going to scale from that point that you kind of selected. Again, it's It's hard for me to explain. I really don't like that they do this in Roblox. There's no way to fix this, I'm pretty sure, but I just don't scale things that much, especially parts. For models, you don't really have a choice, but for parts, I just scale things on all sides just individually, and it works out fine. The rotate tool allows you to rotate a part based on the object's pivot. A pivot of an object is usually the center of a part slash object, but it can be moved anywhere. I like to call it the origin of the part because that's where everything gets rotated slash moved on. But going back to the snapping section, we can change this to be anything we like. I usually choose 5 degrees for ease. Also, uncheck marking all of these will make each object rotate in the decimal places, which I do not recommend doing. If you're wondering, the hotkeys for all these tools is going in order from 1, 2, 3, and 4. Just remember to use Command on Mac before pressing a number or Control on Windows and then press the number. Well, you have to press them both at the same time, technically, but you know. Now, when using the move tool, there is a difference between world movement and local movement. If I, for example, have this rotated part, normally while in world mode, you can only move up and down like the typical movement. But if I hit Control L on Windows or Command L on Mac, you can now move things on the local side of the part. This is most important while using the rotate tool or the move tool. I believe there are no differences when using the scale tool or transform tool. The next thing is specifically for rotating. If I hold down tab, anywhere where my cursor is at, the pivot of the part will move to. This feature will also allow you to snap the cursor to a side, corner, or even center of any part. So you can orbit a part if you really want to. That's what I like to call it when you like kind of rotate a part around like an object, another object. I don't know. Another thing I would like to know, if you want your camera to be the exact top bottom view of a part, all you have to do is open up the view selector, which would be in the view tab. Then it will be like this 6-sided die or something like that. Then all you have to do is left click on the part, press F. You should already know this. This will zoom straight to the part. And then you have to hit the top face or any of the faces, and it'll be exactly on that part, which is really nice. If you try and do this by just hitting F and moving your camera in a weird way, or if you try hitting the die, you'll notice that it's just not going to be perfectly even and set straight in your camera. And I think this is really nice, especially when using the tab option and you really want to get like perfectly circled around. Again, very, very small detail. And I also think that you could use Archimedes to do a very similar thing, but whenever using the tab feature, this is really nice for kind of orbiting a part around another part or something like that. The transform tool is quite a overlooked tool, and I used to think it was amazing, but now it's just kind of okay. The transform tool will open up a very unique interface that seems quite complicated at first, but it truthfully is very, very simple. The icon up here is what I call, not the official name, but I call it the grid. And what I'm able to do is press space or press the icon up there. Space will work on Windows or Mac, doesn't matter. And what I'm able to do is select any side of any part or mesh. May I remind you that meshes will not allow you to select the outlined surface of it. It will be the boundary box. You can see this mostly in like a sphere or something like that. But what the grid will do is it will move to the shape's surface. The transform tool effectively gives you 3 different tools, all basically combined into kind of one big mess. The move tool is a bit funky in this, where you get the y-axis arrows, but you're able to move, and this is the biggest thing about the transform tool. You're able to move a part freely on the grid, which is called Y-lock. Now, of course, this changes wherever you have the grid put as. If I, for instance, had the grid set to the right side of a part, it would be where you're able to move it freely on the Y and the X axes or the Z axis. I don't know. But you have to use the arrows to go on the X or the Z axis. Again, I'm not really sure what orientation I have it set as. But for most cases, if you have the surface set as like the top of the part or the bottom of the part, then it's called a Y lock, and you're not able to move the Y unless you use the arrows, but you're able to freely move it across. If you watched my most recent video, except for this one, of course, you'll notice that I use this especially whenever I was moving trees and mushrooms because I was able to keep them at the same Y. And this is like the biggest thing that I use the transform tool for. There's also like other features that are nice for it, but I think this is the most noticeable one and it's probably the most important one. The last thing is for scaling and rotation, you're able to visually see the amount that it moves by, which seems cool at first until you figure out the beta feature, which I will talk about later. Of course, you can skip to that if you really want to know and you already know all this crap. Now, using the rotate part, you're able to rotate it actually in 1 degrees if you really wanted to, but you're also able to snap it to increments of 22.5 degrees if you move the cursor towards the center of the thingamajig or whatever you call it. Now, the hotkey for the transform tool is Control 5 on Windows or Command 5 on Mac. The transform tool is quite a cool thing to know, I guess, how to use, but it's very rare that you use it, and I think it's just more of a quality of life feature that Roblox gives you to save you a little bit of time. When I mean advanced tools, I really mean the GOL expansion beta feature. The feature opens up a world of new possibilities for us builders, which is just amazing. Since I haven't discovered a great quantity of its capabilities, there are still things I'm learning about this feature. I will have a link to the forums about this beta feature in the description. So if you want to know, again, the details about that, I'll go over the major things about this, but whenever you enable this feature, it is just amazing and makes the transform tool look even sadder, to be honest. The first thing to note is that the hotkeys are now way better. All you have to do is just select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instead of having to hit Command and Control while doing that, which is so much better. It's like crazy. I know. I don't know why that's the first thing I noticed when using it. But also, all the movements you make will now have a integer interface, which is just so much better. But this beta feature especially surrounds the idea of snapping parts, and it does it really well. If you press R, you can rotate a part just 90 degrees, and you can also tilt to the camera for some reason. I don't really know why they have that, but it also moves it by 90 degrees. But it exists for people that are too lazy to go into the rotate setting. I'm not really sure why it exists, to be honest. And this feature does exactly what I've been waiting to do, which is face snapping, which I could have used for the Modern House video. Watch that video if you haven't already, it's a banger. But I truly just want more developers to use this beta feature and kind of explore it. Pretty sure it's been out for a while now. I don't really know. Probably it has been. There's probably people that already know about this. But for all of you that don't, again, go to the link in the description. Or just look up GOL expansion beta feature and it'll come up fine. But it's kind of like hard for me to go through every single detail. I know the series is about going into every single detail, but it's still a tool that I'm exploring and finding use for. It's really cool. It's really, really cool. But there's just a lot about it and a lot that they added with this one. And I think they should make it a default for there to be a integer interface whenever moving a part in the typical rotate, move, or scale tools. And if people really don't like it, they can just turn it off in a setting. But I guess the beta feature is practically a setting. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this extremely informative video. Trust me, most of my videos will not be this informative, but you know. If you haven't watched the last video that I made, please do. I worked quite hard on it, and it took me a little bit. It was also really fun to make. Editing was not that fun. That was stressful as crap. But anyway, if you enjoyed the video, thank you, and I will see you later. All right, I gotta go to the bathroom. Uh-oh. 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 I gotta go to the bathroom.